A radar screen suddenly lights up. Steel-hulled, no AIS closing fast. But this isn't a smuggler. It's a Venezuelan warship, pushing straight toward a U.S. Coast Guard cutter in the middle of an active drug bust. Why would a foreign patrol vessel insert itself into an interdiction it doesn't belong to? And more importantly, what happens when two armed ships decide to occupy the same intercept lane in international waters? Stick with this video because the answer shows how close routine law enforcement can come to igniting an international incident. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. It started like any other drug interdiction. A target moving across open waters, fast but predictable. The kind of profile the Coast Guard had tracked 100 times before. The initial plan was straightforward. Position the Cutter Hamilton into an intercept lane, prepare the helicopter for launch, and be ready to cut off a smuggler before he slipped behind the horizon. But at 24 knots, a second radar contact surged into the same lane, not matching the speed or signature of a light go-fast craft. This was heavier, larger, unmistakably steel. At that moment, the crew in Hamilton's Combat Information Center realized they weren't just hunting smugglers anymore. They were being challenged by a foreign patrol vessel. Hamilton's team had expected an adrenaline-driven chase with small craft darting across the sea. But what appeared on radar instead was a silent Venezuelan cutter running dark. No AIS signal broadcast. No position confirmed to surrounding traffic. In the crowded lanes of shipping routes, a ship concealing its identification violates international practice. But in this case, it was an armed naval vessel. The crew reached out through hails and channels, firm and clear, yet received nothing in return. Instead of adjusting to pass, the contact changed course again and again until its track drew closer and closer to Hamilton's bow. Every bearing change was plotted, marked down with timestamps and exact distances. The Combat Information Center kept a constant log of propulsion tones, engine signatures, and acceleration curves. The goal wasn't only to understand what was coming, it was to preserve every legal option later. If contact ended in a collision or worse, investigators would look for who avoided, who yielded, who escalated first. For Hamilton, that meant everything had to be documented in real time. As the distance closed, separation shrank to under 4 nautical miles, a space small enough to leave little margin for miscalculation. Radar operators and lookouts compared notes, watching the shadowy outline slide directly across the intercept lane. Some describe the maneuver as creating a gate across the sea. By holding that position, the Venezuelan vessel forced Hamilton to either halt her approach or press forward at calculated risk. It was not a mistake in navigation, it was a blockade tactic. Now the rules of engagement took over. Step 1, warn. Step 2, show presence, remain visible, establish right to safe passage. Step 3, continue documenting every move by the opposing vessel. Only if imminent threat developed could escalation occur. The burden lay heavy on Hamilton's commander. Any rash decision in contested waters could ripple into headlines back on shore, where accusations of aggression or violation of sovereignty weighed just as heavily as the tactical danger itself. Above these maneuvers, Hamilton's MH-65 Dolphin lifted into the sky. The helicopter's infrared sensors painted both ships in living detail, sending back thermal imagery into the CIC. Now the crew aboard Hamilton could monitor the smuggler and the intruder simultaneously. 2 operations fused into one: the law enforcement case against drug runners and the responsibility to fend off a possible confrontation with the state navy. The recognition spread quickly among the crew. Treating this contact like another smuggling vessel would be foolish. The Venezuelan cutter wasn't hiding its intentions. It was pressing them. The mission had shifted not by Hamilton's choice, but by the deliberate actions of a state military presence. Routine interdiction had transformed into a moment where politics and law enforcement clashed on open water. And while Hamilton steadied herself to manage the standoff, the original go-fast target, the one carrying over a ton of narcotics, had used the tension to keep running. Out there across the dark water, smugglers still tore across the surface, hoping distraction would give them the gap they needed. As the go-fast tore across the waves, the real test began. This wasn't just about chasing smugglers anymore. It was about carrying out a full interdiction with the weight of a foreign warship looming on scene, watching every maneuver, every order, every sound of engines cutting through the sea. What had started as routine law enforcement suddenly balanced on the edge of diplomacy and confrontation. The smugglers surged forward with long-range tanks bolted to their deck, their boat rising and falling hard on white water. Behind them, Hamilton kept pace, and alongside, the Venezuelan cutter lingered just far enough off the beam to remind the Coast Guard they weren't alone. Hamilton launched her RHIB, the high-speed boat cutting into the dark swells. Spray lifted over the crew as they bore down on the fleeing smugglers. At the same time, the MH-65 Dolphin helicopter swept overhead, banking to maintain visual contact and pushing live imagery directly into Hamilton's Combat Information Center. Every turn of the smuggler's wheel, every shift in distance, every trace of engine noise was relayed back and logged, line by line, with times and coordinates locked in the record. The helicopter wasn't only cover, it was the Coast Guard's impartial witness, a third eye that captured every second so no one could later dispute what had taken place. The smugglers refused to give up speed. Oversized fuel drums strapped across their hull gave them long endurance, and they throttled hard, bouncing low across the crests while their boat shuddered with the strain. The pursuing RHIB tightened the gap, edging into a zone where warnings could be issued. Overhead, the Dolphin set warning flares into the sky, bright streaks that broke against the dark horizon. For the officers pushing forward on the small craft, the chase was now more than adrenaline. It was being conducted under the silent specter of a nearby naval vessel. The Venezuelan cutter stayed close to Hamilton, mimicking her speed, as if daring the Coast Guard to make a single mistake. When the RHIB reached boarding range, the crews switched seamlessly between English and Spanish commands. It was not enough to seize. It had to be clear, professional, beyond dispute. Orders cut across the roar of the engines, directing the smugglers to cut speed and surrender. Meanwhile, Hamilton's CIC kept recording not just the interdiction, but also the Venezuelan cutter's every move. Bearing changes, radar tracks, and approach speed fed into the official log. Nothing could be left open to interpretation. If Caracas later claimed harassment in international waters, the Coast Guard needed every shred of proof ready. Infrared feeds showed the smugglers as bright figures against the cooler sea, their body heat captured while they scrambled on deck under the glare of the floodlights sweeping down from the helicopter. Once slowed, the smugglers complied nervously. Hands raised, they stepped aside as Coast Guard officers clambered aboard. What came into view was unmistakable. Tightly wrapped bundles, stacked in plain sight. Under the blinding light of search beams, the packages glistened as they were lifted one by one into evidence bags. Over a ton of cocaine now lay exposed, seized not in secret, but under the eyes of both a helicopter camera and a hostile warship waiting just off range. Every step was restrained, measured, deliberate. The RHIB operators knew one false shove, one cut corner on procedure, could give the Venezuelans pretense to accuse them of recklessness. So the arrests and the seizure unfolded with textbook precision. Each instruction was clear, each move documented, each moment cross-checked against time-stamped logs. The payoff was real. Smugglers secured, narcotics seized, and Hamilton's bridge informed with every detail completed. Yet Hamilton was not free to stand down. Her crew knew the chase was over, but the Venezuelan cutter had not withdrawn. It lingered beyond direct reach, shadowing, trailing, as though waiting for a reaction. That left a larger question unanswered. Why risk sending a naval ship into the middle of a high-stakes drug bust in waters not under their flag? Only after hours of shadowing did the Venezuelan cutter break silence, declaring it was on sovereign patrol duty before pulling away. That retreat showed the engagement wasn't random. It was a deliberate probe, a way to test how much pressure the Coast Guard would endure before reacting. To outsiders, it might have looked like a simple drug bust, but beneath it was a live demonstration of contested authority at sea. The United States can't treat encounters like these as isolated. If one radar contact shifts an interdiction into a political standoff, how many times can that balance hold in Caribbean waters?